If you've walked outside today or even just glanced at your phone, you know the atmosphere has shifted. It feels heavy. We are standing on the edge of something that historians might well look back on as the definitive end of the post-Cold War era. Following the total collapse of the ceasefire from Operation Midnight Hammer last June, President Trump has made the announcement the world has been dreading. A massive armada is currently steaming toward the Persian Gulf.
It's more than just dread, it's a sense of vertigo, isn't it? We're watching the gears of war lock into place, and I think the American public is vastly underestimating the scale of what is coming. The ships are moving, the rhetoric from Washington has moved past containment to decisive engagement, and the window for diplomacy is closing not by the day but by the hour.
And that is the reality we have to confront today. The central question isn't about whether Iran is a bad actor. I think that's established. The question is much starker. Is a full-scale military confrontation with Iran now a necessary strategic move to neutralize an existential nuclear threat that has ignored every other stoplight? Or, as I know you believe, is this a catastrophic miscalculation that will trigger a global economic depression and, well, force a return to the draft?
I think you framed the stakes perfectly. And to be clear, I fall firmly into the camp that this is a miscalculation of, historic proportions. We are walking into a trap that will break the back of this country.
And I represent the perspective that the status quo has become the most dangerous option of all. I believe that decisive action, despite the terrifying risks, is now the only path left to reestablish security. So let's get into the argument.
Let's do it.
Okay, so I want to start with the why. Why are the ships moving right now? We have to look at the reality of January 2026. Iran is no longer just a problem state. They are a nuclear threshold state. They are enriching uranium to 60%. Let's be clear about what that means. Civilian power needs what, 3 or 4%? There's absolutely no peaceful explanation for 60%. They have kicked out the IAEA inspectors, and crucially, they used the pause after the June 2025 strikes not to de-escalate, but to harden their defenses.
Right. But let's talk about June 2025, Operation Midnight Hammer. That was sold to the American public as the solution. We watched the footage on the news, 14 GBU-57 bunker busters dropped by B-2 Spirits. We were told that was checkmate.
It was a tactical success, but a strategic failure because it was too limited. It bought us 6 months. That's it. And what did we get in those 6 months? The axis of resistance, Hezbollah, the Houthis, the militias in Iraq, they didn't back down. They ramped up. The missile barrage on Al Uwaid Air Base 3 weeks ago proved that deterrence is dead. My premise is this. If we do not act now with overwhelming force, we are tacitly accepting a nuclear-armed Iran that dominates the world's most critical energy corridor. We have reached the tipping point where the cost of inaction finally outweighs the cost of action.
I see the logic, I do, but I think it rests on a dangerous assumption. You're using the phrase overwhelming force as if it's a volume knob on a stereo that we can just turn up to 11 to, fix the glitch. I am arguing that a war with Iran is a logistical impossibility without fundamentally tearing the fabric of American society. Iran is not Iraq. Geographically, it is 3 times the size of Iraq. It is a fortress of mountains, and it is defended by S-300 and the indigenous Bayvar 373 air defense systems. We aren't rolling tanks across a flat desert this time.
But no one is suggesting a ground invasion is the opening move. The Pentagon's briefing suggests an air campaign.
That's the bait and switch. That is where overwhelming force inevitably leads. To actually control the outcome you desire, to secure the nuclear sites and stop the missiles, you were looking at a requirement of 1.5 to 2 million troops. We simply do not have that volunteer force. A war of this magnitude necessitates the return of the draft. We are talking about conscription letters for American families for the first time since Vietnam. My premise is that military action guarantees a regional conflagration that destroys the global economy, all while failing to actually erase the nuclear knowledge.
Okay, I want to push back hard on that bait and switch idea. You are equating decisive military action with a full-scale occupation, almost like you're refighting the 2003 Iraq War in your head. The argument for the Armada and the impending strike package is about degradation, not occupation.
History suggests the former usually turns into the latter.
Not necessarily. Look at the capabilities. The United States possesses air supremacy that is unmatched in human history.
We saw in 2025 that the GBU-57 bunker busters can penetrate facilities like Fordo and Natanz. The failure in 2025 was political. We stopped too soon because we were afraid of escalation. A sustained air campaign focused on dismantling the IRGC's command structure, their ballistic missile sites, and the nuclear infrastructure can degrade Iran's capabilities to the point where they are neutered. We don't need to occupy Tehran to stop them from projecting power.
I'm sorry, but surgical strike is a fantasy that policymakers tell themselves so they can sleep at night. You cannot bomb a country of 87 million people into submission from 30,000 feet. I mean, look at the history of air power. It has never on its own changed a regime or forced a determined adversary to surrender. We bombed North Vietnam for years, more tonnage than World War II. We bombed Serbia. In 1999, it took 78 days of bombing just to get a negotiation, not a surrender. And Iran is infinitely more capable than Serbia was.
But again, the goal isn't regime change. It's disarmament.
But you can't disarm them from the air. You can break buildings, yes, but to ensure they don't rebuild or to stop them from launching the 3,000-plus ballistic missiles they have stockpiled in Beat Mountain silos, you need boots on the ground to physically go in and blow them up. You cited the 2025 strikes, but let's look at the countermove. Iran has the largest missile arsenal in the Middle East. Shab 3s, Sejils, they have range. They can hit Al Udeid, Al Dhafra, and every forward operating base we have. Remember the 2020 strikes on Al-Assad?
Of course.
The TBI cases. 110 American service members suffered traumatic brain injuries, and that was a limited, telegraphed slap on the wrist. If we launch a massive air campaign, the gloves come off. Those 3,000 missiles are coming back at us in waves. Our missile defenses, Patriot, THAAD, they're good, but they can be overwhelmed by volume. The casualties in the first week would be in the thousands. And once American soldiers are dying in those numbers, the political calculus changes. You cannot just fly planes and go home. You get drawn in. The mission creep is instantaneous. And that is when you need those 1.5 million troops. That is when the draft card arrives in the mail for the 18-year-old down the street.
That is a grim picture, certainly. And I don't want to minimize the risk to our service members. However, our Aegis systems and the new laser defense arrays deployed on the Armada are designed specifically for saturation attacks. But let's pause on the troop numbers for a second, because sticking to this 1.5 million number feels like a little like fear-mongering. The modern U.S. military doctrine is built on lean, lethal force. We aren't trying to govern Iran, we are trying to break their offensive capability.
But you can't break the capability without holding the ground. That's the lesson of the last 30 years. You bomb the silos, they move the launchers. You bomb the command center, they operate out of a tunnel. The only way to stop the missiles raining down on U.S. bases in Tel Aviv is to go into those mountains. And those mountains are meat grinder.
Okay. Even if I grant you that the military cost is higher than advertised, we have to weigh it against the economic reality. You mentioned global economic collapse in your opening.
It's the issue that will break the back of the American middle class.
I think that's an exaggeration born of 1970s trauma. The United States is energy independent. We are the largest producer of oil and natural gas in the world. While the global market is interconnected, our domestic supply chains are robust. The argument that we are held hostage by the Strait of Hormuz is a relic. Global markets can absorb shocks. We saw this with Russia and Ukraine. Prices spiked, then they stabilized. The economic cost of a nuclear-armed Iran, destabilizing the entire region for decades, blackmailing shipping lanes, funding terror, is exponentially higher than the cost of a temporary spike in oil prices.
Temporary? You're using that word to describe what would be a structural collapse of the global energy trade? It doesn't matter if we pump oil in Texas if the global price is set by the margin. 20% of the world's oil supply flows through the Strait of Hormuz. 20%.
But can Iran actually close it? That's a threat they've made for 40 years.
They don't have to seal it hermetically like a zipper. They just have to make it uninsurable. That is the key mechanism people forget: maritime insurance. Iran has thousands of sea mines. They have Kilo-class submarines, and they have anti-ship missiles tucked into the mountains along the coast. If they sink one supertanker,
Just one, insurance rates for any vessel entering the Gulf skyrocket by 10,000%. It becomes economically impossible to move a ship. Traffic stops. Analysts project oil hitting $150, maybe $300 a barrel within 48 hours.
And you think that translates immediately to the pump here at home?
Instantly. We're talking about gas jumping to $7, maybe $12 a gallon. Think about the kitchen table impact of that. It isn't just about how much it costs to fill up your SUV. It's the diesel that powers the trucks delivering food to Kroger and Walmart. It's the jet fuel for Amazon's air cargo. Everything you buy has a transportation cost baked into it. If fuel triples, the price of milk, bread, and medicine triples. You would see an inflation explosion that would crush working families who are already stretched thin. Your 401k would be decimated as the markets panic. The idea that the U.S. economy is insulated from a Strait of Hormuz closure it's dangerous wishful thinking.
I concede that the economic shock would be severe, perhaps more severe than I'm hoping. But I maintain that the geopolitical shock of inaction is worse. If Iran gets the bomb, they can threaten that closure every single day, forever. But let's move to the battlefield itself. You mentioned the missiles targeting our bases. My position is that the U.S. homeland is secure, and that while regional conflict is inevitable, the military can contain the axis of resistance within the theater of operations.
I come at it from a totally different angle. I think the definition of theater of operations has changed fundamentally. We aren't just fighting over there anymore.
You mean terrorism, sleeper cells?
I'm referring to asymmetric warfare that reaches the American living room. Look at the cyber capabilities Iran has developed. They have been building this specifically for this moment since Stuxnet hit them in 2010. We know about Operation Ababel, where they targeted U.S. banks. In a total war scenario, the gloves come off. We are talking about attacks on the U.S. power grid, water treatment systems, financial networks.
But our cyber defenses are the most sophisticated in the world. We have Cyber Command.
And yet, our infrastructure is old, it's fragmented, and it's vulnerable. Imagine the chaos if the power grid in the Northeast goes down for a week in February, or if the banking system freezes and credit cards stop working. But beyond cyber, look at the physical proxies. Hezbollah has 150,000 rockets pointed at Israel. That isn't just a local skirmish. That isn't a volume to overwhelm the Iron Dome completely. If we strike Iran, Hezbollah activates. The Houthis activate. We aren't fighting one country, we are fighting a network embedded across the entire Middle East.
That network is precisely why we have to act. You are describing a hydra that is already choking the region. If we don't cut off the head, Tehran, those proxies will only get stronger, better armed, and more capable. Hezbollah with 150,000 rockets is bad. Hezbollah with tactical nuclear weapons provided by a nuclear-armed Iran is an apocalypse. We have to break the network before it goes nuclear.
But this leads us to the core paradox of your entire argument, the nuclear paradox.
Which is?
Your primary goal, the stated reason for this massive armada, is to prevent the bomb. You say, we cannot allow a North Korea situation.
Correct. That is the red line.
But attacking them is the one thing that guarantees they will build it.
Explain that logic. Because from where I sit, destroying the centrifuges stops the building. You break the machine stops working.
You can destroy centrifuges. You can blow up buildings. We did that with Stuxnet. We did that with Midnight Hammer. But you cannot bomb knowledge. The scientists know how to do this. They have the schematics in their heads. If we launch a massive attack, we prove to the Iranian hardliners that their only safety, their only guarantee against regime change is a nuclear deterrent. Look at North Korea. We don't invade them. Why? Because they have the bomb. An attack convinces the Iranian regime that they must rush for the bomb at all costs to survive. It validates their paranoia.
I'm not convinced by that, because it assumes we leave them with the capacity to rush. If the strike is comprehensive enough, if the degradation is total, it sets them back a decade. And in that decade, the regime might fall, or dynamics might change. The alternative is letting them cross the threshold next week.
And in that decade of setback, we are occupying a country of 87 million people, dealing with a draft, burying our dead, and paying $12 for gas. We are breaking our own back to buy time.
It is a choice between two catastrophic options. I don't deny that. But we have to ask, can the world live with a nuclear Iran?
We live with a nuclear North Korea. We lived with a nuclear Soviet Union. Deterrence works both ways.
The Soviet Union was a rational actor. They wanted to survive. The IRGC operates on a revolutionary theology that views martyrdom as a victory. Trusting mutually assured destruction with a regime that chants death to America and death to Israel as a matter of religious principle is a gamble I don't think we can take.
And I think assuming that a war will be surgical and controlled is the gamble that loses. We are staring at a repeat of the shock 6 weeks in Iraq fantasy, but on a scale that will break the back of our military and our economy.
We're coming to the end of our time, and the gravity of this is inescapable. I want to summarize my position. The costs you've outlined, the economic shock, the risk of escalation, the draft, are terrifying. I acknowledge that. But we are looking at a nuclear threshold state that has already fired on U.S. forces and is actively destabilizing the region. Deterrence has failed. Containment has failed. The Armada is moving because we have run out of easy choices. If we do not act decisively now, we are handing the future of the Middle East to a nuclear-armed theocracy.
And I'll reiterate that this path leads to ruin. We are talking about a war that demands a draft, sending our children to fight in mountains 3 times the size of Iraq. We are talking about an economic depression triggered by $12 gas that will hollow out our savings. And ultimately, we are talking about a strategy that will accelerate Iranian nuclear proliferation rather than stop it. I urge our listeners to listen to the veterans who have been to war in this region. They are the ones saying, "Don't do it." The fog of war is real, and plans rarely survive contact with reality.
It is a heavy burden on the American conscience. As of today, January 30, 2026, the ships are moving, the missiles are ready, but the final order has not been given.
It is a choice, and it's one that will define the next half-century.
Thank you for engaging with us on this difficult reality. We encourage you to weigh these costs and come to your own conclusion.